I wasn't planning to tell anyone this, but here I am whispering into my phone like it's a diary I can hide. My hands are shaky, and the coffee shop around me feels too loud, the clink of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine. I'm tucked in a corner, hoping no one notices how my eyes keep darting to the door. It's been 3 months since it happened, and I still feel his hand in mine, warm, steady, like it belonged there. My fiancé Tom was at home flipping through wedding venues while I was somewhere else. Not physically, but in my heart. I'm not proud of it. I'm terrified, actually, because saying this out loud makes it real. It started so innocently. Or at least that's what I told myself. Tom and I were good, you know. We'd been together 4 years, engaged for 6 months. He's solid, the kind of guy who remembers your favorite ice cream, and texts you good night even when he's exhausted. We were planning a spring wedding, something small maybe in his parents' backyard. I could see our life together, kids, a dog, a house with a porch swing. It was safe, warm, like slipping into a favorite sweater. But then I met Ethan, and everything I thought I knew about myself started to unravel. I was at a work conference, stuck in a stuffy hotel ballroom, when Ethan sat down next to me. He was a guest speaker, someone my boss insisted I network with. I wasn't expecting much, just another suit with a PowerPoint. But he had this laugh, soft and real. And when he leaned over to whisper about the terrible coffee, his cologne hit me cedar, and something sharp, like a forest after rain. My stomach flipped, and I hated myself for it. "You look like you're plotting an escape," he said, his eyes crinkling. "Guilty," I replied, and we both laughed too easily. We talked for hours that day, not about work, but about everything else, books, music, the way city lights make you feel small. I kept twisting my engagement ring under the table like it could anchor me. I knew I was crossing a line, not because we did anything wrong, but because I wanted to. I wanted to keep talking to stay in that bubble where Tom didn't exist. When Ethan brushed my arm, reaching for his drink, it was like a spark, and I didn't pull away. I should have, I know that now. By the time I got back to my hotel room, my phone was buzzing with texts from Tom. "Found a venue with lilacs your favorite," he wrote, and my chest ached. I stared at his message, picturing his smile, the way he'd hug me when I got home. But all I could think about was Ethan's voice low and teasing, and how I'd already memorized the way his fingers tapped his coffee cup. I told myself it was nothing, just a fleeting crush. I'd go home, focus on Tom, and forget Ethan's name. But deep down, I knew I was lying. I wanted to see him again, and that want, it was like a splinter under my skin, small but impossible to ignore. I'm sitting here now 3 months later, and I can still feel that splinter. I don't know how to explain what happened next without sounding like a cliché, but I owe it to myself to be honest. At least here in this voice memo, I can admit the truth before it eats me alive. I'm back still in this coffee shop, the air thick with cinnamon and steamed milk. My phone's battery is low, but I can't stop now. I need to get this out, that conference where I met Ethan. It wasn't just a one-day thing, it stretched over a weekend, and by the second day, I was looking for him in every crowd. I told myself it was professional curiosity, that I just admired his work. But when I saw him across the hotel lobby, my heart did this stupid little jump, and I knew it was more. He was leaning against a pillar, scrolling through his phone, his dark hair catching the chandelier light. I could have walked away, stuck to my schedule, but my feet moved before my brain caught up. "Hey stranger," I said, trying to sound casual. He looked up, and his smile. God, it was like he'd been waiting for me. "Thought you ditched me after yesterday," he teased, pocketing his phone. Not a chance, I shot back, and the air between us felt charged like static before a storm. We ended up at a breakout session together, some panel on industry trends, but I barely heard a word. Ethan kept leaning over, whispering snarky comments about the speakers, and I'd giggle like a teenager. His knee brushed mine under the table, and I didn't move away. I should have, but the warmth of his leg against mine felt alive. My engagement ring felt heavy though, like it was burning a hole in my finger. I kept thinking about Tom, how he'd be calling me later to ask how my day went. I'd have to lie, and that thought made my stomach twist. After the session, Ethan suggested grabbing lunch at the hotel cafe. I hesitated, knowing it was a bad idea, but the words, "Sure, why not," slipped out. We sat by a window, sunlight spilling over the table, and talked about everything but work. He told me about growing up in a small town, how he'd sneak out to watch the stars. I shared stories about my college days, things I hadn't even told Tom. Every time our eyes met, I felt this pull, like I was teetering on an edge. His hand rested on the table inches from mine, and I kept imagining what it'd feel like to touch him, just once. "You're easy to talk to," he said, stirring his coffee, his voice low. "Not everyone is, you know." I flushed, muttering, "You're not so bad yourself." But inside, I was screaming at myself to stop. I was engaged, I loved Tom. So why was I sitting here memorizing the way Ethan's fingers curled around his mug? Why did I feel more awake than I had in months? When lunch ended, he walked me to the elevator. My heart was pounding, and I kept smelling his cologne again, cedar sharp grounding. As the doors opened, he said, "See you tomorrow." And I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Back in my room, I stared at Tom's latest text, "Miss you. Can't wait to see you." Guilt crashed over me like a wave, but underneath it was something worse, this tiny traitorous part of me that didn't want the conference to end. I wanted more time with Ethan, and admitting that even to myself felt like stepping into a fire. I'm still here, tucked in this coffee shop corner, the hum of voices blending with the clatter of dishes. My hands are steadier now, but my chest feels tight, like I'm unearthing something I buried deep. That conference weekend, it didn't end with lunch. Ethan and I kept finding each other like magnets we couldn't pull apart. By the third day, our conversations had shifted from playful to personal, and I was letting myself fall into something I couldn't control. We were at a networking mixer, the room buzzing with small talk and clinking glasses. I was nursing a sparkling water, trying to focus on work, when Ethan appeared at my side. His sleeve brushed my arm, and I caught that cedar scent again, sharp and dizzying. "You look like you're ready to bolt," he said, his voice warm teasing. "Caught me," I replied. And we slipped into a quiet corner away from the crowd. The dim light cast shadows on his face, and I noticed a small scar above his eyebrow, barely visible. I wanted to ask about it, to know everything about him. That thought made my stomach lurch. We talked about our fears, our dreams, things I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Tom. Ethan admitted he was afraid of being alone, of building a life with no one to share it. "What about you?" he asked, his eyes locked on mine. I hesitated, twisting my engagement ring. "I'm scared I'll wake up one day and realize I chose the wrong life," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It was the truth, and saying it felt like betraying Tom, but I couldn't stop. Ethan didn't push, just nodded like he understood too well. His hand was on the table close enough that I could feel the warmth of it. I kept imagining sliding my fingers over his, just to see what it would feel like. The temptation was so strong, it scared me, but I didn't move. Instead, I leaned closer, letting his words wrap around me. He told me about a trip he'd taken to the coast, how the ocean air felt like freedom. I could almost taste the salt on my tongue, and for a moment I pictured us there together, standing on a cliff, wind in our hair. It was a fantasy, but it felt so real. You ever feel like you're living someone else's story? He asked, his voice low. All the time, I admitted, and my throat tightened. I thought of Tom, how he texted me that morning about wedding cake flavors, vanilla or lemon, and how I hadn't replied. Guilt clawed at me, but Ethan's presence was like a tide pulling me under. When he laughed soft and unguarded, I felt a spark in my chest, like I was waking up after years of sleep. As the mixer wound down, he walked me to the hotel lobby. The chandelier light from that first day glowed above us, and I remembered how I'd felt when I first saw him, nervous, alive. Same time tomorrow? He asked, his smile soft. Yeah, I said, my voice shaky. Back in my room, I stared at Tom's unanswered text, my ring glinting in the lamplight. I was slipping further, and the worst part, I didn't want to stop. I wanted Ethan's voice, his closeness, his everything, and that want was tearing me apart. I'm still in this coffee shop, the air now heavy with the scent of burnt caramel from someone's latte. My phone's propped against my cup, and I'm trying to keep my voice low, like I'm afraid someone might overhear. That conference, it's like a movie I can't stop replaying. By the last day, Ethan and I weren't just talking. We were crossing lines, ones I swore I'd never touch. And then it happened, the moment I can't shake, the one that changed everything. We'd skipped the final panel to grab coffee at a little place near the hotel. The sun was low, painting the street in gold, and we sat outside, our knees brushing under the tiny table. His laugh was softer that day, his eyes searching mine, like he was looking for something I wasn't ready to give. We talked about nothing important, movies, bad pizza, but every word felt loaded, like we were saying more than we let on. His hand rested on the table, his fingers tapping a rhythm only he knew, and I couldn't stop staring at them. Long, steady, the kind of hands you trust. I don't know how it happened. One minute we were laughing about some dumb rom-com, and the next he reached across the table and took my hand. His skin was warm, rough at the edges, and my breath caught like I'd been dunked in cold water. I should have pulled away. I was engaged, for God's sake, but I didn't. I let his fingers lace through mine, and it felt like the world shrank to just us. The clatter of the cafe fading away. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle, like he knew we were on dangerous ground. I don't know, I whispered, and it was the most honest I'd been all weekend. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, slow, deliberate, and my heart pounded so hard I thought he'd hear it. I could smell his cologne again, cedar sharp, like a forest I wanted to get lost in. Every nerve in my body was screaming to lean closer, to let this moment swallow me whole. But then I saw my engagement ring glinting in the sunlight, and Tom's face flashed in my mind. His smile, his texts about lilacs and cake flavors. Guilt slammed into me, but it wasn't enough to make me let go. I wanted this, wanted Ethan, and that truth felt like a knife in my chest. Why does this feel so right? I murmured, barely audible. Ethan's grip tightened just for a second, and he said, because it does. His voice was low roar, like he was confessing too. We sat there, hands locked for what felt like forever, until a waiter dropped a tray and the spell broke. I pulled my hand back, my skin still tingling where he touched me. We didn't talk about it after, just paid the bill and walked back to the hotel in silence. But that moment, it was a line crossed a door I couldn't unopen. Back in my room, I stared at Tom's latest text, love you. Home tomorrow? I couldn't answer. I kept feeling Ethan's hand in mine, the warmth, the weight of it. I was unraveling, and the worst part was knowing I'd let it happen. I'd chosen to let it happen, and now I had to live with what came next. I'm still here, the coffee shop quieter now, just a low murmur, and the faint smell of vanilla lingering in the air. My fingers are cold against my phone, and I'm trying to keep my voice steady, but it's hard. That moment with Ethan, his hand in mine, it broke something in me. I went back home the next day back to Tom, but I wasn't the same. I was carrying this secret, this betrayal, and it was heavier than I'd expected. Meanwhile, Tom was deep in wedding plans, oblivious, and that made everything worse. I got home to our apartment, and Tom was waiting with takeout and a binder full of venue photos. He hugged me, his arms warm and familiar, and I felt like the worst person alive. "Missed you," he said, kissing my forehead. "Missed you too," I mumbled, but my voice cracked and I turned away to hide my face. All I could think about was Ethan's thumb brushing my knuckles, the way my heart had raced. Tom's touch, once so comforting, felt like a reminder of everything I was risking. That week, Tom was all in on the wedding. He'd sit on the couch, flipping through catering menus, asking chicken or salmon, "What do you think?" I'd nod, barely listening, my mind back at that cafe table with Ethan. I kept smelling cedar in my dreams, kept hearing Ethan's voice saying, "Because it does." I wanted to scream to tell Tom I didn't deserve him, but I couldn't. Instead, I'd twist my engagement ring, the metal cool against my skin, and force a smile. "Chicken's fine," I'd say, my stomach churning. One night, we went to see a venue, a garden with lilacs, just like Tom had texted about. The air was sweet, the flowers glowing under string lights, and Tom was beaming. "This could be it, right?" he said, squeezing my hand. I nodded, but my chest ached. I was standing in the place where I'd marry Tom, but all I could think about was Ethan, how he'd held my hand, how I hadn't pulled away. I wanted to feel that spark again, that aliveness, and the guilt of that want was suffocating. I let go of Tom's hand to adjust my scarf, but really, I just needed to breathe. Later in the car, Tom reached for me, his fingers brushing my wrist. It was gentle, loving, but it felt wrong, like I was cheating just by letting him touch me. I stared out the window, the street lights blurring, and wondered what Ethan was doing. Was he thinking of me? Did he feel the same pull? The temptation to text him was so strong, I had to shove my phone in my bag. "You okay?" Tom asked, his voice soft, "Just tired." I lied, hating how easy it was. I was living two lives, one with Tom building our future, and one in my head where Ethan's touch still burned. Every wedding detail felt like a betrayal, a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I loved Tom, I did, but Ethan had woken something in me, something I couldn't ignore. I was terrified of what that meant, terrified of the choice I was too weak to make. Sitting here now, I can still feel Tom's hand in mine, at that venue, the lilacs in the air, and I know I was already breaking his heart, even if he didn't know it yet. The coffee shop's almost empty now, just a barista wiping counters, and the faint smell of espresso grounds clinging to the air. My voice feels raw, like I've been talking for days, but I can't stop, not yet. After that week of wedding plans with Tom, the weight of what I'd done with Ethan, holding his hand, letting myself want him, started to crush me. I couldn't keep pretending I was the same person who'd said yes to Tom's proposal. The guilt was eating me alive, and I had to face it, even if it meant tearing myself apart. I started avoiding Tom's questions about the wedding. He'd bring up guest lists or music, and I'd change the subject, my heart racing like I was hiding a crime. At night, I'd lie awake next to him, his steady breathing a contrast to the storm in my head. I kept replaying that moment with Ethan, his fingers laced with mine, the warmth of his skin. It wasn't just a touch, it was the choice one I'd made without thinking of Tom. And now every time Tom smiled at me, I felt like a liar. I didn't deserve his trust, his love, his lilac gardens. One evening, I was alone in our apartment, Tom out with friends. I sat on the couch, the lamplight soft and golden, and I let myself cry. My engagement ring caught the light, and I twisted it off, setting it on the coffee table. It felt like shedding a skin, I didn't fit anymore. I wanted to call Ethan to hear his voice, to feel that spark again. The temptation was so strong, my hand shook as I grabbed my phone. But instead, I opened a photo of Tom and me from last summer, us laughing at a picnic, his arm around me. My chest ached, and I whispered, "What am I doing to no one?" I knew then that I'd betrayed Tom, not just with Ethan's touch, but with my heart. I'd let myself fall for someone else, let myself imagine a different life. The realization was like a punch. I was the kind of person who could do that, who could hurt someone I loved. "I'm sorry," I said to the photo, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, but sorry wasn't enough." I couldn't undo what I'd felt, what I still felt. Ethan's laugh, his cedar scent, the way he'd looked at me, they were burned into me, and I hated myself for it. I thought about telling Tom everything, spilling it all, and letting him decide what to do. But the thought of his face, his hurt, stopped me cold. I imagined his voice soft but sharp. "You held his hand." While I was planning our wedding, I couldn't bear it. So I sat there alone, the apartment too quiet, and made a promise to myself I'd bury this. I'd push Ethan out of my mind, and be the fiancé Tom deserved. But even as I thought it, I knew it was a lie. My heart was split, and no amount of guilt could stitch it back together. Sitting here now, I can still feel that lamplight on my face, the cold metal of my ring, as I slid it back on. I was drowning in my own choices, and the worst part was knowing I'd let it go this far. I'd let myself betray the man I loved, and I didn't know how to live with that. The coffee shop's dead now, just me and the hum of the fridge in the corner. The air sharp with the tang of roasted beans. My throat's tight like I'm choking on everything I've said so far. After that night alone, staring at Tom's photo, I knew I couldn't keep living with this secret splitting me in two. I had to face the truth, not just about Ethan, but about who I was becoming. I couldn't keep pretending I was the woman Tom thought he was marrying. It wasn't fair to him or to me. The next morning, Tom was in the kitchen humming as he made pancakes. The smell of butter and syrup filled the air, and he looked so happy, so unaware. I stood in the doorway, my hands twisting together, and felt like I was about to shatter. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, flipping a pancake, his eyes soft. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely there. He froze, the spatula hovering, and I saw a flicker of fear in his face. "Sure," he said, turning off the stove. "What's up?" We sat at the table, the pancakes forgotten, and I stared at my hands, the engagement ring glinting like a warning. I wanted to run to keep this buried, but I couldn't. I haven't been honest. I started, my voice shaking. At the conference, I got close to someone, too close. I didn't say Ethan's name, didn't mention the hand-holding, but I admitted enough that I'd felt something, that I'd let it grow. Tom's face went still, his hands gripping the table. "Did you?" he started, but he couldn't finish. "No," I said quickly. "It wasn't physical, but I wanted it to be, and I hate myself for it." The silence was brutal. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel the weight of his stare. I thought of Ethan's touch, how it had felt so right, and the guilt crashed over me again. I was tempted even then to check my phone to see if Ethan had messaged me, but I pushed it down. This was about Tom, about us. "I love you," I said, tears spilling, "but I don't know if I'm the person you deserve." He looked away, his jaw tight, and said, "I need time." That was it. He got up, grabbed his keys and left. I spent the day alone, the apartment too big, too quiet. I kept smelling the syrup from breakfast, a sickening reminder of how I'd ruined everything. I took off my ring again, set it on the table, and cried until my chest hurt. I was confessing to myself as much as to Tom. I'd let myself betray him, let myself want a life that wasn't ours. But sitting there, I knew I had to choose. I loved Tom, his steadiness, his warmth. Ethan was a spark of what if, but Tom was my home. I decided then I'd fight for us if he'd let me. When Tom came back that night, we talked, really talked. It was messy, painful, but we laid it all bare. I promised to cut contact with Ethan, to be honest, to rebuild what I'd broken. He didn't forgive me, not yet, but he didn't leave either. And that was enough for me to start. The coffee shop's completely empty now, just me and the soft glow of fairy lights strung along the wall, their warmth mixing with the faint lingering scent of cinnamon. I'm whispering into my phone, my voice quieter, like I'm wrapping up a secret I've held too long. It's been 3 months since I told Tom the truth, since I chose to fight for us. I'm not sure where we're headed, but I'm learning to live with the pieces of what I broke, and that's something. After that night, Tom and I moved slowly, like we were relearning each other. We put the wedding plans on hold, no lilacs, no cake flavors, just us trying to rebuild. Some days were good, like when we'd cook dinner and laugh over nothing, his hand brushing mine as we chopped vegetables. Other days I'd catch him staring out the window, his face distant, and I'd know he was thinking about what I'd done. I'd feel it too, the ghost of Ethan's touch, the cedar scent, I couldn't quite forget. It wasn't temptation anymore, just a memory that stung like pressing a bruise. I kept my promise. I blocked Ethan's number, deleted his messages, and avoided anything that reminded me of that conference. But late at night, when Tom was asleep, I'd lie there, the moonlight spilling across our bed, and wonder if I'd made the right choice. Not because I wanted Ethan, but because I was scared I'd hurt Tom again. I'd whisper to myself, "You're enough," trying to believe it. The guilt was still there, sharp and heavy, but I was learning to carry it. One evening, Tom and I were on the couch, a movie playing we weren't really watching. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady, and I felt a flicker of the old safety, the love we'd built before I'd cracked it. "I'm trying," he said, his voice low, like he was confessing too. "I know," I replied, squeezing his hand. "Me too." It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was hope, and that was enough to keep going. I think about that cafe with Ethan, sometimes the way the sunlight hit the table, the way his hand felt in mine. It was a moment real and electric, but it wasn't a life. Tom is my life, messy, imperfect, but mine. I betrayed him, and I'll always carry that, but I'm not running from it anymore. I'm here showing up, choosing him every day. And maybe that's what love is, not perfection, but the choice to stay even when you've seen the worst of yourself. Sitting here, the fairy lights blinking softly, I feel a strange peace. I'm not the woman I was before Ethan, but I'm not the one who broke Tom's heart either. I'm someone new, learning to trust myself again. I don't know if Tom and I will make it, but I know I'll fight for it, for him, for us, and that's the truth. I'm leaving here in this voice memo, like a weight I can finally set down. I hope wherever you are, you find your truth too.